You need to go, now! Run!
No, not without you!
I'll be right behind you! Go!
The first man hit Daniel hard enough to split his lip. The second held a knife to the woman's throat. The third leaned close and whispered, "Your husband isn't coming back for you." Daniel drove his shoulder into the knife hand before he had time to think. Metal flashed. The woman screamed. A grocery bag burst across the sidewalk, apples rolling into the rain as the three men turned on him. If stories like this touch something inside you, subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment before we begin, because by the time this story ends, you may look at the word lost differently. Daniel Mercer had spent 2 years learning to lose without making a sound. He slept on one side of the bed, left one coffee cup in the cabinet, and stopped buying the cinnamon cereal Elena used to pretend she hated. He no longer turned his head when a woman with dark hair passed him in a crowd. He had learned the dangerous kind of grief, the kind that becomes ordinary. But that night, with rain sliding down his face and a stranger staring at him through terrified green eyes, the old wound inside his chest opened like it had never closed. The man with the knife recovered first. He swung wildly. Daniel caught his wrist, but the attacker slammed a knee into Daniel's stomach. Air left him. His grip loosened. The woman stumbled backward into a brick wall. "Run!" Daniel shouted. She didn't. Not because she was frozen, because she was looking at him, really looking. The tall man grabbed Daniel by the collar and threw him against a parked car. His skull struck the window. For a second, the street tilted and the rain became a curtain of silver needles. Then the woman moved. She snatched the fallen umbrella from the ground and drove its broken metal tip into the tall man's cheek. He roared and staggered away. Daniel saw his opening. He kicked the knife from the second man's hand, grabbed the woman's wrist, and pulled her between two cars just as headlights swept across the street. A taxi honked. The three attackers vanished into the alley. The woman's hand shook inside his. "Are you hurt?" Daniel asked. She stared at the blood on his mouth. "No," she whispered. "You are." Not important. Her eyes moved over his face, slowly, as though she were trying to recognize a dream. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. A siren sounded in the distance, and the color drained from her face. "They'll find me," she said. "Who?" She looked past him toward the alley. "The people who taught me how to disappear." Daniel took her to his apartment because the police car that arrived first had no officers inside it, only a blue light spinning over an empty seat. By the time real sirens reached the block, the woman was gone. She had slipped away while Daniel spoke to a shopkeeper across the street. All she left behind was a small brass key and a sentence written on the back of a grocery receipt. "You were right to stop looking." Daniel stood under the awning, rainwater dripping from his sleeve, and read it 3 times. He knew that handwriting. He had seen it on birthday cards, on unpaid bills, on the note Elena left beside his pillow the night she disappeared. "I'm sorry. Don't follow me." For 2 years, Daniel had believed those words were the final choice of a woman who no longer wanted him. Now, holding the receipt, he understood something terrifying. She hadn't left him. She had been warning him. He ran home and tore through the drawer where he kept every piece of evidence he claimed he had thrown away. Elena's old passport, a cracked phone, a photograph from their 2nd anniversary, the police report that described her disappearance as voluntary departure. At the bottom was the last envelope she had ever touched. Daniel had never opened it, not because he was afraid of what it contained, but because he had been afraid it would contain nothing. He slid the brass key into the tiny lock on the envelope. It fit. Inside was a folded photograph and a train ticket dated 3 days after Elena vanished. The photograph showed Elena standing beside a black sedan outside the Northbridge Hotel. She looked thinner than Daniel remembered. Her face was bruised. Beside her stood Victor Hale, Daniel's former business partner and the man who had delivered the news that Elena was dead. On the back, Elena had written 4 words: "Ask Victor about the fire." Daniel's hands went numb. Victor had told him Elena's car went over a mountain bridge during a storm. He had said the vehicle burned before rescuers arrived. He had said there were no remains because the river had carried them away.
Victor had held Daniel while he cried. Victor had arranged the funeral. Victor had stood beside him at the empty grave. And Victor had been the last person Daniel trusted. At 6 the next morning, Daniel drove to Hale Security, the company Victor built after Daniel had sold his shares to pay Elena's medical bills. The lobby had marble floors, armed guards, and a wall displaying photographs of people Victor claimed to protect. Victor appeared before Daniel reached the elevator. He wore a charcoal suit and the same expression he had worn at the funeral: patient, sorrowful, carefully exhausted. "Daniel," he said, "you look terrible. Where is Elena?" Victor didn't blink, but his right thumb pressed once against his wedding ring. That tiny movement had once meant he was nervous before a deal. "She's dead. I saw her last night." Grief can manufacture very convincing moments. "She gave me this." Daniel placed the receipt on the desk between them. Victor read the words. The patient expression disappeared for less than a second. It was enough. "You should go home," Victor said. "Why did you tell me her car burned?" "Because it did." "Why did you say there were no remains?" "Because there weren't." "Why was she photographed with you 3 days after she vanished?" Victor leaned back. "Where did you get that?" Daniel smiled without humor. "That's not an answer." Victor's eyes hardened. "You sold me your company because you couldn't manage it while mourning. I gave you money, Daniel. I paid your debts. I protected you from people who wanted to take advantage of you. You bought everything I had. No, you gave it away." Victor stood and came around the desk. His voice softened. "Elena was unstable. She had secrets. You knew that before you married her." Daniel remembered the way Elena used to lock her phone in the kitchen drawer. The nights she woke screaming and claimed she couldn't remember why. The months when she became distant, then intensely affectionate, as if apologizing for being alive. He remembered his own anger. "You said she was having an affair," Daniel said. Victor's silence was the answer. "You told me she was leaving with someone else. I told you what she wanted you to believe." "Why?" Victor stepped close enough that Daniel could smell the mint on his breath. "Because some people are safer when they think they've been abandoned." The elevator doors opened behind Daniel. A guard stood inside. Victor's voice turned cold. "Go home. Destroy that photograph. Forget the woman you saw." "And if I don't?" Victor looked at him the way a man looks at a locked door he already owns the key to. Then you'll lose someone else.
He went to the North Bridge Hotel. The building had been closed since a fire 2 years earlier. Its boarded windows stared over the city like blind eyes. The photograph had been taken near the service entrance, and the brass key opened a storage room padlock in the basement. Inside, Daniel found a mattress, a cracked mirror, 3 empty water bottles, and a wall covered with dates. Elena's handwriting filled the concrete. January 4th. Daniel still believes Victor. January 19th. They moved me again. February 2nd. I heard Daniel outside, but I couldn't call out. March 11. Victor says if I speak, Daniel dies. June 8th. I don't know how long I can stay afraid. Daniel pressed both hands over his mouth. He had spent 2 years asking why Elena never called. She had been calling, in places he never knew existed. A floorboard creaked above him. Daniel looked up. "Who's there?" The door slammed shut. He ran toward it, but smoke began pouring through the vents. The sharp smell of gasoline filled the basement. Victor had not warned him. He had come to erase the room. Daniel wrapped his shirt over his mouth and kicked the door until the swollen wood gave way. Flames crawled along the hallway ceiling. He stumbled up the stairs, coughing, and burst through a side exit as black smoke rolled into the morning street. A man in a gray coat watched from across the road. Daniel recognized him from the alley. The third attacker. The man lifted 2 fingers to his lips, then pointed toward Daniel's apartment. By the time Daniel reached home, the front door was open. The place had been searched. Drawers overturned, books ripped from shelves. The photograph was gone. On the kitchen table sat Elena's wedding ring. Daniel had buried that ring with her because the police told him they recovered it from the burned car. He picked it up. The inside was engraved with a sentence Elena had chosen on their wedding day. "When the world goes dark, find me." A noise came from the bedroom. Daniel turned. The woman from the alley stood in the doorway holding a pistol with both hands. She looked terrified of the weapon, terrified of him, and somehow more terrified of what would happen if she lowered it. "Put it down," Daniel said. "I can't." "Who are you?" Her lips trembled. "You already know." Daniel stepped into the light. The woman lifted her chin. Rain had washed the makeup from her face. A thin scar ran from her left eyebrow to her cheek. Her hair was cut shorter, but the eyes were the same. The small, crescent-shaped mark beneath her ear was the same. Even the way she held her breath was the same. Daniel's knees weakened. "Elena?" She lowered the gun. He crossed the room in 3 steps, then stopped before touching her, because some part of him still believed she might vanish if he moved too quickly. Elena reached out and pressed 2 fingers to the scar on his lip. "You still fight with your left hand too low," she whispered. Daniel made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh. Then she collapsed against him. He held her so tightly she gasped. For a few seconds, nothing existed except her heartbeat. Then Elena pushed him away. "You can't be here." "I've been here for 2 years. No, I mean you can't be in this. You disappeared. I was taken. You let me believe you were dead. I tried to come home. Then why didn't you?" Her face crumpled. "Because Victor showed me a video of you sleeping." Daniel froze. "He stood beside your bed," Elena said. "He told me one of his men was inside our house. He said if I contacted you, they would kill you and make it look like suicide. I didn't believe him at first. Then I saw the footage." "Why didn't you tell the police?" "Which police? The officer who arrived after I was taken was one of Victor's men." Daniel's anger rose so quickly it nearly pushed the fear away. "Who is Victor?" Elena looked toward the window. "The reason I married you." The word struck harder than the punch in the alley. Daniel stepped back. "What does that mean?" "I didn't meet you by accident." She told him everything in fragments. Before Elena knew Daniel, she had worked as an accountant for a private security firm owned by Victor Hale. The firm moved money for politicians, contractors, and criminals. Elena discovered a ledger showing payments to judges, police commanders, and a city councilman who later awarded Victor a $1 billion surveillance contract. She copied the ledger. Victor found out. He didn't kill her because he wanted the ledger back. He used her fear to force her into marrying Daniel, a man Victor trusted and knew could be manipulated. Daniel's company had the software Victor needed to erase financial records. Elena was supposed to get close to Daniel, retrieve access codes, and disappear. "But I fell in love with you," she said. Daniel stared at her. "That part was real?" "The only real part." "Then why did you steal from me?" "Because by the time I understood what Victor was doing, he had my father in a private prison and your mother under surveillance. I thought I could protect everyone by doing what he asked." "You never told me." "I was ashamed." "You should have trusted me." "I did. That was the problem." A hard knock struck the apartment door. Elena went pale. Daniel moved toward the kitchen, but she caught his arm. "Not the door. The fire escape." They climbed out the window as a bullet shattered the glass behind them. Daniel pulled Elena onto the metal stairs, and the two of them descended while footsteps thundered inside the apartment. At the alley, Elena led him through a laundromat, behind a locked service gate, and into a delivery truck that smelled like detergent and wet cardboard. Only when the truck began moving did Daniel realize she was bleeding. A dark stain spread beneath her ribs. "You were shot?" "Grazed. That is not a word people use when they're okay." She tried to smile. "You always hated dramatic words." "I hated being lied to." Her smile vanished. "Then you're going to hate what comes next." The truck stopped beneath an abandoned theater. Elena took him through a trap door into an underground room where 6 people watched them from behind computer screens. A woman with silver hair stood up. "Daniel Mercer," she said. "We've been trying to reach you for 23 months." "Who are you?" "People Victor betrayed before he betrayed you." On the largest screen was a map of the city, covered in red points. Banks, police stations, courthouses, hospitals. "He's preparing to release stolen surveillance data," Elena said. "He'll use the chaos to destroy the ledger and make himself indispensable to the government." "And you have proof?" Daniel asked. Elena looked at the silver-haired woman. "Not enough. The original files were stored on Daniel's company server." "My company burned down." "The server didn't." Daniel's blood cooled. Victor had purchased the building after the fire. The server had been transferred to Hale Security's private data center. "And you need me to get inside," Daniel said. "We need you to decide whether you still want revenge," Elena said. "I want justice." "That's what people call revenge when they're still afraid of what it will cost." Daniel looked at her, the woman he had mourned, the woman who had lied to him, the woman who had walked back into his life carrying a gun and a wound. "What will it cost?" "You may have to let the world hear how badly I failed you." The plan began that night. Daniel would return to Victor's company and pretend to be broken enough to obey. Elena would remain hidden. The group would use Daniel's old access codes to enter the data center during Victor's televised charity gala. But Victor was not fooled. He welcomed Daniel into the gala beneath chandeliers and cameras, then announced him from the stage. 2 years ago, Victor told the crowd, my dearest friend lost his wife and nearly lost himself.
Tonight, Daniel is here to prove that grief does not have to be the end of a man. Applause rose around Daniel. His face appeared on a giant screen beside a photograph of Elena's empty grave. Victor had turned Daniel's pain into entertainment. Daniel stood beneath the lights while strangers praised his courage. A reporter asked him how he had survived. Daniel looked at Victor. By finally understanding who was standing beside me. The applause died. Victor smiled,
but the muscle in his jaw jumped. "What does that mean?" the reporter asked. "It means grief makes you trust the wrong people." Victor walked toward him. "Daniel is still struggling," he said smoothly. "Please, give him privacy." Then his hand closed around Daniel's elbow. The grip looked friendly to the cameras. It was not. "You have 5 minutes," Victor whispered. "Tell me where she is." Daniel felt panic climb his throat. "I don't know what you mean." Victor leaned closer. "I know she came to your apartment. I know she has the ring. I know you're wearing a wire." Daniel's stomach dropped. Victor had seen through the plan. Across the ballroom, one of Victor's men touched his earpiece. Daniel had to choose quickly. He grabbed a champagne glass and smashed it against Victor's face. The room erupted. Security rushed forward. Cameras swung toward them. Victor fell against the stage, blood streaking his cheek. Daniel shouted, "Ask him where he kept my wife." For 1 second, the entire gala went silent. Then every phone in the room began to vibrate. The silver-haired woman had released the first set of files. Screens around the ballroom changed. Bank transfers appeared, audio recordings, photographs of judges meeting Victor in hotel rooms, police commanders accepting envelopes. And then a video began playing. Victor stood in a basement room 2 years earlier, speaking to Elena while Daniel slept on a monitor beside him. "You will leave the note," Victor said in the recording. "You will make him believe you chose someone else. If you resist, he dies." Elena's voice shook. "And if you kill him anyway?" Victor smiled. "Then you'll spend the rest of your life knowing your honesty buried him." The audience watched in horror. Victor stared at the screen, his face finally stripped of control. "Turn it off!" he screamed. No one moved. Daniel's knees nearly gave out as he watched the man he had trusted threaten him in the room where Elena had been held. But the video continued. Elena looked directly into the camera. "If Daniel ever sees this, I need him to know something. I did not leave because I stopped loving him. I left because I believed my fear was more useful than his trust." Daniel shut his eyes. She had recorded it before she escaped. Victor lunged toward the control booth. Daniel intercepted him. They crashed into the stage curtains. Victor was older, but fear made him vicious. He struck Daniel again and again, whispering between blows. "You think she loves you? She used you from the beginning." Daniel blocked a punch. "I know. She married you for access. I know. She lied every day." Daniel grabbed Victor's suit and drove him into the wooden podium. "She came back." Victor spat blood. "She'll leave again." Daniel paused. That was the wound Victor had aimed for. Not anger, not shame. Fear. The fear that love could return only to disappear a second time. Victor saw it and smiled. "There it is," he whispered. "You still don't trust her." Daniel looked through the crowd. Elena stood near the ballroom entrance, pale and trembling, surrounded by police officers who had arrived after the files went public. She had heard every word. Daniel released Victor. Then he walked toward her. He wanted to say that everything was forgiven. He wanted to become the kind of man who could erase 2 years with one embrace. But real love had never been that clean. "You should have told me," he said. "I know. You should have trusted me. I know. I'm furious with you. I know." His voice broke. I buried you. Elena's eyes filled. I buried myself with you. That was the moment the distance between them finally broke. Daniel pulled her close, not because the pain was gone, but because it was theirs now. No locked rooms, no forged notes, no secrets designed to protect them from one another. Behind them, Victor tried to run. He made it as far as the lobby before the silver-haired woman stepped into his path and handed the police a drive. Your entire network is on this, she said. Victor looked past her at Daniel and Elena. You think this ends with me? Daniel answered without turning. No. It ends with the truth. Victor was arrested in front of the cameras he had spent years controlling. The trial lasted 8 months. Elena testified for 4 days. Daniel testified for 2. On the 3rd day, Victor's attorneys displayed every lie Elena had ever told Daniel. Her stolen access codes, the accounts she emptied, the messages she deleted. They called her a conspirator, a thief, a willing accomplice. Daniel sat behind her and listened. When the prosecutor asked whether he still loved Elena, the courtroom became silent. Daniel looked at his wife. Yes, he said. The prosecutor asked, even knowing she deceived you.
Daniel swallowed. Love doesn't make deception harmless. It makes the truth harder to survive.
The prosecutor asked, do you forgive her? Daniel glanced at Elena's hands. She was twisting a tissue into a rope. Forgiveness isn't a courtroom answer, he said. But I'm here because she came back and told the truth when lying would have been easier. Elena cried then, not dramatically, not beautifully. Her shoulders shook. She covered her face and apologized to no one in particular. Daniel reached for her hand. She took it. Victor was sentenced to life in prison. The men from the alley were found through the files and arrested across 3 states. The city councilman resigned. The police commander disappeared before he could be charged, but was captured months later at a border checkpoint carrying 6 passports. The public called Daniel a hero. He never felt like one. Heroes, he thought, were people who knew what they were doing. He had simply refused to watch another person disappear. A year after the trial, Daniel and Elena returned to the North Bridge Hotel. The building had been restored, but the basement room remained untouched. Elena had asked the new owners to keep the wall where she wrote the dates. She added one final line beneath the others. October 17th. We found our way back. Daniel stood beside her holding 2 coffees. You still make mine too sweet, he said. You still complain and drink the whole thing. They sat on the old mattress in silence. There were things they still did not know how to talk about. Elena woke from nightmares. Daniel sometimes checked the locks 3 times. A stranger's dark sedan could ruin an entire afternoon. Some days, love felt less like fireworks and more like choosing not to leave when the room became difficult. But they were learning. Not how to return to who they had been. How to become someone new without pretending the old wounds never happened. Before they left, Elena slipped the brass key into Daniel's palm. What does it open now? He asked. She smiled. Nothing. Then why keep it? Because it reminds me that locked doors can open from the inside. Outside, evening settled over the street. People hurried past, carrying groceries, umbrellas, small private heartbreaks. Daniel took Elena's hand, and this time, neither of them looked over their shoulder. He had once believed losing someone meant their story was over. Then, on a rainy street, he discovered that sometimes the person you mourn is still fighting their way back to you. And sometimes, saving a stranger is the only way to recognize the love you thought you buried. If you were Daniel, would you have forgiven Elena after learning why she disappeared? Or would the betrayal have been too painful to overcome?